Hello, friends. I hope you are all doing good. I welcome you all to this small class on Socrates as part of the political science optional. Though the word Socrates and as a thinker, he is not mentioned in our syllabus. However, Socrates is important to understand the thinker which is mentioned in our syllabus named Plato. In this particular lecture, we'll just have a very brief glimpse of Socrates and we'll try to cover Socrates in a series of 2 to 3 videos. My name is Pavneet. I am an author of International Relations book published by McGraw-Hill Education. I also teach at an academy where I take courses on international relations, security issues, political science optional, and also, importantly, current affairs. Without wasting much time, let's get going, friends. First question that arises in our mind is, what is political science and why is it called as a science? You see, friends, please remember firstly, in a very simple language, science is basically a systematic study of a natural phenomena. Science is a systematic study of natural phenomena. However, when we use the word political science, the first thing to understand here is that political science is not a pure science. And political science is basically a social science. And being a social science, it helps us to analyze the political phenomena in a systematic way. So therefore, please remember, friends, that what is political science? Political science is a systematic study of political phenomena. So when we study the political phenomena in a systematic way, we call it political science. Now the question is, friends, what is Western political thought? You see, there are 3 words here that I need you to understand. Western, political, and thought. The word Western means that there are some thinkers whom we are going to study, and these thinkers belong to the Western part of the world. It's important to remember, friends, that there is a distinction between the thinkers in the Western part and the Eastern part of the world. The thinkers which were there in the Western part had a very different philosophy altogether, whereas the thinkers in the Eastern part of the world also had a very distinct form of philosophy. Eastern part of the world also included the Indian thinkers, which also are a part of our syllabus, which we shall be studying in the political science optional. Similarly, friends, when we talk about the word political, please remember that the word political comes from the Greek word called polis. And this Greek word called polis basically means a city-state. What exactly is a city-state? I'll explain you that a little later. However, for the time being, just remember this basic point. Now friends, when we use the word thought, what is the meaning of the word thought? The word thought basically means understanding of an idea with respect to certain time and space. Now this is an important point, friends, that you need to understand here. That whenever we talk about the word thought basically means understanding of an idea. This idea is basically an idea given primarily by a thinker. And this idea given by a thinker is studied in a certain time period. Time period means the time period of history. So there is a study of an idea in a specific time period of history. And similarly, we study the idea in a specific space. The space here basically implies the geographical location of the thinker. that where the thinker was located. So for example, whenever we study Socrates, we say that Socrates is an ancient political thinker in the western part of the world, who basically analyzed the political situation, though we will see that he did not really give a very politically strong theory, as he was more of a thinker who focused more on ethics. But it was Plato who developed a political theory. But Socrates, belonging to the western part of the world, came out with certain ideas when in the ancient time period of the geographical location of Greece. So in ancient Greece, Socrates came out with certain ideas, which he at that time helped us to build the Western political thought further as such. Now comes, friends, an important concept that we need to understand called the Western political theory. Now the thing is that in order to understand the Western political theory, we have to understand this concept of balance of power. What is balance of power? It's a theory which says that the world in which we live in is a system. So let's assume this is the world. The world in which we live in is a system. The system has different countries A, B, C, D. We are assuming that these four are the countries in the system. Now the theory says all these countries in the system are in a perfect equilibrium. The theory says that all the countries in the system are in a perfect equilibrium. Equilibrium means that as of now, all these countries are equal in power. If all these countries are equal in power, then one thing is very clear, that there is stability in the system. However, the theory says that this stability in the system can be disturbed. Now the question that arises, friends, is that when can the stability be disturbed? The balance of power theory says that the stability can be disturbed if any one country in the system becomes powerful. When we say it becomes powerful, it means that it expands its economic power and military power. Though in political science optional, when we study the term power, there are various multiple meanings attached to it, friends. However, for the time being, we are looking at a very simplistic definition of power. And as per this simplistic definition of power, any country in the system has the potential to become powerful when it expands its economic and military power. Thus, let's assume that country A in the system became powerful, and this country A disturbed the balance of power. Now, if country A disturbed the balance of power, what can the countries B, C and D do now? Because the countries B, C and D are affected. They are affected because the power equilibrium has been disturbed. The stability has been disturbed. So in this regard, friends, the balance of power theory says that apart from multiple ways, one way by which these countries B, C and D can mitigate the disturbed balance of power is called alliance formation. There are various things that these countries B, C and D can do right now, but our concern for the time being is to understand the concept of alliance formation. So the theory of balance of power says that B, C, D will try to undertake alliance formation to mitigate the balance of power which has been disturbed. How? B and C can come together and form an alliance. This is just an assumption. If B and C come together, form an alliance, collective power of B and C now becomes higher and they can mitigate the threat of A. Similarly, C and D can come together and form an alliance. If C and D come together and form an alliance, then the collective power of C and D also can help them to mitigate the balance of power disturbed by a powerful A. Or for that matter, the similar phenomena can be witnessed by B or D also. Or for that matter, we can also have for B, C and D coming together to form an alliance against A. So please keep in mind that one of the ways by which stability in the system can be maintained if the power equilibrium is disturbed is basically through alliance formation. Now, I welcome you to Greece. Why Greece? Because as I just told you friends, Socrates belonged to Greece and our first thinker in the syllabus, Plato, also belonged to the geographical location of Greece. So when we study political thought and we are studying the Western political thought as part of our syllabus, we have to study it in a specific time and space. The time period right now is ancient Greece and the space is geographical location of the Greece as such. Now friends, ancient Greece basically had political entities which were called city-states. And each city-state here basically had a different form of government. That means there was no unanimous form of government followed by all city-states. So for example, we had a form of government here called monarchy. Friends, monarchy is a situation where there is rule by a king. This was one form of the government in the ancient Greece. We also had another form of government at that time called aristocracy. Aristocracy is a form of government where there is rule by people of higher class. So rule by people of higher class constitutes aristocracy, which was also one of the common forms of government found in the ancient Greece. The third form of the government found in ancient Greece was oligarchy. Oligarchy means a form of government where a small group of people rule the state. So when a small group of people rule the state, it's called oligarchy. So ancient Greece had these different city-states which were governed differently and they were all independent units. Out of these multiple city-states at that time, friends, the two important city-states that we need to keep in mind are the city-states of Athens and the city-state of Sparta. A simple glance here will help you to understand that the city-state of Athens is located north of Sparta. Similarly, friends, I want you to also understand that Athens was geographically closer to this territory called Asia Minor. So the city-state of Athens is located north of Sparta. Now please remember, friends, that in the city-state of Sparta, there were some people who were living belonging to the lower class were called helots. Helots were basically people living in Sparta, in this city-state of Sparta, and they belonged to the lower class. Sparta was of the belief that the city-states which are in the south of Sparta, that means this area, Sparta was of this opinion and belief that the city-states which are in the south of Sparta would probably use these helots, who were the people belonging to lower class living in Sparta, to create some trouble. So helots were perceived as troublemakers, and therefore, in order to ensure its own security from any disturbance from the southern part, Sparta undertook alliance formation. And when Sparta undertook alliance formation, through these alliances, Sparta was able to basically ensure its own security. However, we have this city-state here called the Athens in the north. Athens as a city-state was very frustrated, irritated because of repeated invasions from Asia Minor. So there were repeated invasions from Asia Minor on Athens. And because of these repeated invasions on Athens, They were very upset and frustrated about it. So, what did Athens do? Athens, in order to ensure their security from these invasions from Asia Minor, they basically came together with 200 other small city states and formed what is called a Delian League. Athens was witnessing repeated invasions from Asia Minor. Because of these repeated invasions from Asia Minor, they were frustrated about their security. They basically joined hands with around 200 city-states in Greece and formed something called as a Delian League. The Delian League was also known as by another name, Athenian League. Now, when Athens formed this Athenian or Delian League, the power of Athens also increased. Now, when the power of Athens also increased, one thing became very important, that the creation of this Delian League or Athenian League created insecurity in Sparta. Because the power of one country increases in the system, as I told you in previous concept, other countries around you will become insecure about you. So when Athens created the Athenian League or the Delian League, the Sparta as a city-state became insecure. So Sparta also decided that they would also form alliances to ensure that tomorrow Athens does not trouble them. So Sparta, which was already undertaking alliance formation to tackle these helots, now started doing more alliance formation to tackle Athens. And consequently, as a result of which, Sparta also, because of this insecurity generated because of a powerful Athens, ended up in creating the Peloponnesian League. So we have the Peloponnesian League and we have the Athenian League. This situation of Peloponnesian League and Athenian League apparently is very similar to the modern day situation which we witnessed in the Cold War of NATO at one side and the Warsaw Pact at the other side. And because of these two antagonistic, insecure alliances, conflict was very natural. Though during the Cold War, the two superpowers, Soviet Union and US, displayed maturity to ensure that the Cold War does not become into a hot war, though it did become hot war in multiple theaters. That did not happen at that time in the ancient Greece. Because of these alliances, and these alliances being formed because of insecurity of Athens and Sparta differently, these alliances now created the space for a conflict between Athens and Sparta. As a result of which, friends, it is in 431 BC that Athenian League and the Sparta's Peloponnesian League witnessed a fight, and this fight was now known as the Peloponnesian War. So this Peloponnesian War broke out in 431 BC and it continued all the way till 404 BC. The war, Peloponnesian War, ended in 404 BC, and very surprisingly, friends, in this war, Sparta defeated Athens. Athens was one of the very powerful city-states, considering the fact that it had brought together around 200 city-states to form the Athenian League that had drastically increased their power. In contrast to that, a small city-state like Sparta ended up in defeating a major power like Athens. The defeat of Athens was a shock to the people because Athens was basically a dominant power. And the people of Athens were shocked to see that they are defeated basically by a small city-state or a small power called Sparta. And it is in this backdrop of Greece, of that specific historical time, now we basically come to welcome the wisest man in Greece. The wisest man in Greece was none other but Socrates. Now the question that arises is that when we say that Socrates is the wisest man, why do we say so? We say so because Socrates himself proclaimed that he is ignorant and he knows nothing. In fact, his proclamation that he is ignorant and knows nothing made him very, very popular. Also, at the same time, friends, we need to remember that Socrates is also called as the father of ethics. In a simple language, friends, ethics is a discipline that studies how should the people live their lives and what behaviors the people ought to display. Socrates, who is also known as the father of ethics, is a person who said this, that ethics is a discipline that studies how people should live their lives and what behaviors people ought to display. Socrates also was a very famous personality because he would often keep wandering from one place to the other. And as he kept wandering from one place to the other, he kept on speaking and interacting with the youth. And because he often used to interact with the youth, and his interactions were relatively quite radical, the government at that time found Socrates to be a very dangerous man, and as a result of which they decided that he should be imprisoned and put to death. Socrates happily accepted death because he said that the reason why I accept death is not because that I have corrupted the youth, as the government says, because of my radical ideas, but because I genuinely stand for those ideas that I mean. This is a very important thing. And what Socrates said is that accepting death for the sake of acceptance of my ideas is a very important thing that can also be used by you when you are writing an answer in the Indian government and politics part of the paper 1 part 2, and when you are talking about defections, that how political defections in India have become a problem. Political defections normally occur primarily because of some motivation of a position of power. However, that also means a compromisation of the ethics of the person and compromising with basically the ideas that you held. Because when you are a part of a political party, it's an ideology that inspires you. But when you change the ideology overnight just to take a position of power, then it goes against the very ethics. And this is what precisely Socrates was trying to say. So an analogy can always be drawn and written there in the exam. So Socrates basically accepted death and consumed poison, but stood to his ideas. So keeping this in mind, we shall continue further about Socrates, about the philosophical debates of that time in the next video. Thank you.